The words slammed into the bank's marble lobby like a hammer, shattering silence. "Security escort this man out immediately." Just 2 sentences, but enough to make the entire Summit First Trust Bank tremble with shock confusion, and something much heavier, public humiliation, laid bare for everyone to witness. Jordan Cole lifted his head, his deep, dark eyes reflecting the harsh white lights above. He didn't flinch, didn't erupt in anger, didn't leap to defend himself the way most people might have. He simply looked. A calm, unsettling look, the kind carried by a man far too familiar with moments where the world decided to judge him by the color of his skin, rather than the worth he actually carried. Karen Whitfield stood just a few steps away. Her ash-gray suit hugged her shoulders tightly, shaping the image of authority she believed she had built over 15 years of being a branch manager. But in her sharp brown eyes there was no authority, only prejudice, only the blind confidence of someone who believed she could size up a person with a single, dismissive glance. The confrontation began there. Cold air drifted in through the large glass doors, carrying the chill of LaSalle Avenue into the crowded lobby. Customers lined up in neat rows, but every movement froze the moment Karen's voice rang out. Some people glanced toward Jordan, searching for any sign of wrongdoing, but he remained seated, steady, composed, as if he were the observer, not the person being dragged into this senseless battle. At counter number 3, a young teller named Sophia Ramirez felt her heart tighten. She recognized that look in Karen's eyes, the look of judgment. She had seen it fall on customers before, but never this openly, never this shamelessly. Her hands trembled as she quietly opened the camera on her phone behind the computer screen. Something instinctive told her this moment would go far beyond anything she had witnessed. Jordan never looked away from Karen. His breathing was even a straight, unbroken line. In his palm, his phone vibrated with an incoming call from Tokyo. He glanced at the screen and declined it. The casual motion caught several people off guard. Who turns down an international call so calmly in the middle of a moment like this? Karen pushed harder. "You are clearly not one of our clients," she said, her voice sharp and sour, like wine left open too long. "If you're here for some assistance programs or to cause trouble, you're in the wrong place." A few customers looked away, embarrassed for her. An older man tightened his grip on his wallet as if Jordan were a threat. A businessman near the advisory table shook his head, whispering, "Unbelievable." Jordan remained seated. But this time, a faint shadow crossed his eyes, not anger but calculation. He was studying Karen the way one studies a problem. He counted every breath, every reaction, every mistake she was making, without realizing she was walking straight into the biggest downfall of her career. In the upper left corner, the digital clock displayed 2:47 in the afternoon, 87 minutes before the market closed. A normal moment to most people. But to Jordan, the man being thrown out of a bank, he quietly controlled every minute, held enormous weight. He finally spoke. His voice was low, steady, sharp enough to slice through the thick, suffocating embarrassment hanging in the air. "Ms. Whitfield, I am simply requesting to speak with the person handling business account openings. If you can check the status of my file, we can resolve this immediately." Karen let out a short, mocking laugh. A sound without respect, without patience, without thought. "And you think I'm going to waste my time checking anything for you?" In that instant, Sophia saw the clearest shift in Jordan's expression, like a breeze rippling across a still lake. Not anger, but realization. Realization that every explanation would be dismissed, every calm effort disregarded, and every prejudice in Karen's mind was about to block her from seeing a truth that could destroy her career in minutes. The doors opened again, and another blast of cold air swept through. A group of new customers entered, but stopped almost immediately, unsure whether they should even remain in the building. Near the entrance, Deshaun Miller, owner of a sneaker shop nearby, shook his head as he pulled out his phone. Not letting this happen again, he muttered while recording. The situation spread like a spark, hitting dry wind. Jordan slowly adjusted his tie, a small, simple gesture, but one carrying the quiet force of a man who knew composure was the ultimate weapon. In his mind, his father's voice echoed from years ago. You don't need to raise your voice to prove your worth. You only need to stand tall. And then Jordan stood up. The lobby seemed to stop breathing. Every person froze mid-movement. Karen stepped back just an inch, but enough to reveal the first flicker of fear, the first hint that something was terribly wrong, even if she didn't yet understand that her life was about to change forever. Jordan looked directly into her eyes. His gaze held no challenge and no hatred. It carried only one truth. She had misjudged the worst possible person she could misjudge, and from that moment on, the entire bank would never be the same again. The moment Jordan's final words faded, the entire bank lobby fell into a thin, paper, fragile silence, the kind that would tear apart with just a spark. And that spark came instantly not from Karen, not from Jordan, but from the phones rising all across the room. With hands trembling so much she could barely hold the camera steady, Sofia Ramirez hit Go Live without even thinking. Her face flickered briefly in the frame before the lens shifted to Jordan and Karen. Something deep in her gut told her this moment would never stay trapped inside those four walls. It would spread fast and far. Within 60 seconds, the viewer count jumped to 37, then 58, then 102. Comments began pouring in like a heavy rainstorm. What's happening right now? Has that manager lost her mind? What did he even do? Unbelievable, this is still happening in 2025. Sofia swallowed hard. Everything was moving faster than she had imagined, but her hand stayed up, recording almost on instinct. Just a few steps away, Deshaun Miller had already gone live on Instagram. He widened the frame voice, low but burning with anger. Y'all see this? This is happening in the middle of downtown Chicago. I've seen this man get treated badly here before, but today is too much. A notification popped up. A Justice Watch Chicago had reshared his video. That page had nearly 200,000 followers. Deshaun's view count jumped from 40 to 300 in seconds. Chimes and notification sounds echoed through the lobby, mixing with the uneven breaths of the people watching. Jordan heard all of it. They thought he didn't know they were live streaming. Of course he knew. From the moment Sofia raised her phone, he saw the fear and determination mixed in her eyes, and he understood. Silence had never protected anyone from injustice. Speaking up, recording, exposing those were the only ways to force truth into the open. He didn't stop them. He let every camera roll freely because he knew the truth today needed as many witnesses as possible. Meanwhile, something shifted in Karen Whitfield. It was no longer curiosity in the eyes around her. No longer discomfort from a few customers. It was dozens of stares turning sharply back at her, judging her, questioning her. A pressure she wasn't built to handle began pressing down on her shoulders. But instead of waking up, she sank deeper into the trap she had built with her own hands. Her voice sliced through the air like a blade. Put those phones away. This is private bank property. Who told you people you could film? No one responded. No one lowered their phone. They stood firm, witnesses who understood this truth could not be erased with shouting. And that was the moment Karen felt something she hadn't felt in years: unease. Jordan stayed silent. He knew Karen was walking straight toward the edge. Every word she spoke pushed her further into her own downfall. He didn't need to lift a finger. Standing still, calm, composed, and radiating the quiet power of someone who had spent a lifetime fighting in silence was enough. The glass doors slid open again. Another rush of cold air swept in as a group of college students stepped inside. 3 of them lifted their phones instantly. A girl with blue hair whispered, "Oh my God, this is definitely going on TikTok." Her friend raised his camera and began commenting loudly, frustration mixed with adrenaline. "Can't believe this is happening in the middle of Chicago." Hashtags began flooding the feed. Chicago Bank Bias Summit First Scandal. This is 2025. Sophia watched her viewer. Count hit 400, her heartbeat slamming in her chest. She had suddenly become the unwilling reporter of a breaking story. But at that moment, she understood silence was the real danger. This was the chance not to create chaos, but to expose a truth countless people had endured alone. Her eyes stung. Karen stepped forward again, voice rising, cracking at the edges. "You are causing a disturbance. I am ordering you to leave immediately." It no longer sounded like authority, but the desperate voice of someone losing control. Jordan looked at her, still saying nothing. His eyes were still and cold, like a winter lake carrying something Karen could not decipher, the quiet pain of someone far too familiar with this treatment, woven with the iron patience of a man who had prepared for this moment for years. He understood perfectly. Discrimination wasn't just words. It was a system, and every moment people stayed silent was another knot tightening that system's grip. Deshawn lifted his phone closer, his voice trembling. "Look at him." Jordan still calm. "That's what scares me the most. When someone has endured too much, they learn how to stand still, even while being insulted. This isn't right. Nobody deserves this." He didn't even realize tears had gathered at the corners of his eyes. At counter number 4, a teller let out a soft sigh, her eyes heavy with sympathy. She didn't dare step in, but her gaze said everything. "I'm sorry this is happening to you." Yet she also knew that with a manager like Karen standing there, no employee would dare intervene. They feared losing their job, being retaliated against, becoming a target. And that made everything hurt even more. Jordan's phone rang again. This time the screen displayed Managing Director London. The glow from the screen reflected across his composed face. He declined the call again, not because he was too busy arguing with Karen, but because he was watching everything, every reaction, every glance, every heavy breath filling the room. His silence was the loudest statement of all. And that silence, combined with the dozens of cameras still recording, shifted the entire atmosphere. A space once controlled by Karen no longer belonged to her. Power does not always sit in a title. Power sits in the eyes, watching in the lenses, recording in the truth, spreading across the internet. Jordan understood that better than anyone, and he knew this battle was only beginning. When Karen Whitfield shouted for the 3rd time, heavy footsteps echoed from the security desk. Harold Brooks emerged like a shadow, carved out of the thick pages of an old novel. He was no longer young, 57 years old, broad-shouldered, but slightly stooped from years wearing body armor and being responsible for the safety of thousands who walked through these doors every day. His short, greying hair, his deep brown skin, and the sharp gaze of a man who had seen every type of person, every type of situation, every type of lie, gave him the ability to read truth before most people even opened their mouths. But when he saw Jordan Cole standing tall in the center of the lobby, immaculate in a tailored suit, a luxury leather briefcase hanging lightly from his left hand, and calm eyes, still as dark water, Harold's instincts flared. Something was wrong. From where he stood, he could also see the red live icon glowing on the phones pointed at the scene. That alone slowed his heartbeat. He had seen situations go viral before, and they always ended the same way, in a career-ending storm for whoever stood on the wrong side of the wind. He stepped closer. Karen spotted him and suddenly seemed reinvigorated. She moved forward, stabbing a red-painted finger toward Jordan, as if accusing a dangerous criminal. "Mr. Brooks, I am ordering you to remove this man from the bank immediately." Her voice rang sharp and shrill against the marble walls. Harold paused for half a second. Just a half-breath, but enough for Karen to frown. A veteran head of security did not stop without reason. He scanned Jordan again, his eyes moving point to point, like mapping a hazardous terrain. Jordan didn't move, but when Harold looked into his eyes, he saw something very few people could maintain in a moment like this: absolute composure. No fear, no anger, no loss of control. Only the solid confidence of a man who knew exactly how much weight he carried, and was simply waiting for the right moment to set it down. "Ms. Whitfield," Harold said, his voice low and careful, "we might need to look into this a little more." "There is nothing to look into." Karen snapped her voice, cracking like shattering glass. "I already told you. This man does not belong here. He is manipulating you." Harold's jaw tightened, a sign he was beginning to strain. There was nothing more unprofessional in a major financial institution than a manager screaming at her security officer in front of clients. The phones kept recording. Sophia noticed the look on Harold's face and realized something Karen never would. Harold sensed danger. And not from Jordan, but from the way Karen was handling this. So Harold turned to Jordan, voice soft but steady. "Do you need any assistance?" Jordan met his eyes, speaking with a voice smooth as wind, gliding over water. "Thank you, Mr. Brooks. But I think we should give Ms. Whitfield the chance to finish this conversation herself. Just one sentence. One sentence that carried a weight as heavy as lead." The word "finish" sent a chill down Harold's spine. A normal customer wouldn't say that. A normal customer would have left argued or lost their temper. But Jordan did none of those things. He was waiting for Karen to bury herself. Harold swallowed. His instincts were screaming now. This man was not a stranger. Karen's panic rose. She marched toward Jordan, her high heels striking the floor with sharp, hostile clicks. "You are causing a disturbance on purpose so you can record a video and profit off of it. I am not letting this continue. Mr. Brooks, that is an order. Remove him using any means necessary." The entire lobby gasped as one. Any means necessary was not an ordinary phrase. It was not just abuse of power. It was a phrase that could lead to lawsuits, investigations, and the collapse of a career. Heat flooded Harold's face. He had done this job for over 20 years. He had restrained drunk troublemakers, diffused furious customers, tackled thieves trying to bolt through the exits, but he had never heard a manager order force against a man dressed in an expensive suit, standing upright calm, and speaking with immaculate politeness. He spoke slowly, choosing each word as if disarming a bomb. "Miss Whitfield, I truly think we should. I do not pay you to think Karen screamed. A silent explosion went off in Harold's mind. The phones zoomed in. That sentence in this context was not just disrespectful. It could destroy the bank. Jordan remained still. But now his eyes were not just observing. They seemed to pierce through Karen as though analyzing a figure, a report, a dangerous discrepancy in a system he understood better than anyone in the room. His gaze unsettled her. It made her feel measured, evaluated, exposed at her weakest points. She stepped back half a pace. Harold studied Jordan closely. He noticed details others had ignored: the rare platinum watch, the flawless Windsor knot on his tie, the leather of his briefcase, not the off-the-shelf kind, but custom-crafted, and the international call Jordan had declined earlier. Then another one from London. People who caused disturbances didn't have schedules like this. Harold began to understand. This was not an ordinary situation. Jordan checked his watch again. The gesture was tiny, but to Harold it felt like an alarm bell. A worried person would check their phone. An angry person would tap repeatedly. But Jordan checked his watch as if time belonged to him. Harold opened his mouth to say something when the radio on his shoulder crackled security report to the director's meeting room immediately. It was a high-priority request used only when senior leadership arrived at a branch. Karen snapped instantly. "Ignore it. You deal with this first." Those words sent a chill racing down Harold's spine. A manager could be prideful, even wrong, but no one was reckless enough to tell security to ignore a director-level request unless they had no understanding of how a bank truly operated. He inhaled slowly, then turned to Jordan. "Who exactly are you?" Jordan looked straight at him. A small flicker of light flashed in his eyes. "You will know very soon, Mr. Brooks." And in that moment, Harold realized Karen Whitfield's career was no longer measured in months or weeks. It was now measured in minutes, and the platinum watch on Jordan's wrist had just turned 3:15 in the afternoon. Time was moving, and the truth was about to explode. A sharp, slicing tension split the suffocating air when Jordan Cole slowly turned to face Karen Whitfield, not with defiance, not with anger, but with a calm so controlled, so unnervingly steady. It felt like he already knew the truth, hovering above her head. The truth she herself had no idea was about to collapse. Karen planted a hand on her hip, trying to mask the unease that was beginning to crawl through her veins. Her eyes scanned Jordan from head to toe, searching for a crack, a flaw, anything she could latch on to. But there was nothing. The man stood like a steel column in the center of the bank lobby, and that composure only made her more irritated. "I will ask one last time," Karen said, her voice pitched high. "What exactly are you trying to do here? Create a scene, get attention, or set up some kind of trap so you can sue the bank?" Jordan tilted his head slightly, as though he were processing every word she threw at him and sorting it into data points. One corner of his mouth lifted not a smile, but the quiet signal of someone fully in control. "Mrs. Whitfield," he said softly, but sharper than anything echoing in the lobby. "Do you know who holds controlling power over Summit First Trust Bank?" The lobby froze. The phone's recording trembled slightly, as if the cameras themselves flinched. Sophia Ramirez gasped, lips parted. Deshaun Miller pulled his camera closer, breath quickening. A group of students who had just entered exchanged looks and whispered, "Hold on, that's not a normal question." Karen was the only one who laughed, a short, dismissive scoff, dripping with arrogance. "You think that line works on me?" She folded her arms and lifted her chin. "I don't care who owns what or who controls what. All I need to know is who is allowed in here and who is not. And you are not." The words landed like slabs of stone, but Jordan remained quiet for a few seconds. Then he replied gently, "Unfortunately, that is exactly the thing you should care about most." A shiver ran down Harold Brooks's spine. He turned fully toward Jordan, studying him for a long, tense moment. That sentence triggered something in him, a hardened instinct, the same instinct that had saved him in situations where even a late blink could cost a life. He didn't know what was coming, but he knew it would not be small. Karen laughed again. She shook her head, like she was dealing with someone trying to dramatize a moment beyond reason. "I don't need to hear any more nonsense." She shot a glare at Harold. "Mr. Brooks, escort him out right now." Harold didn't move, and that alone made Karen's face flush with anger. "What is wrong with you?" That was an order. Everyone noticed his hesitation. When Harold glanced at Jordan, there was a quiet respect hidden in his eyes, a respect Karen never once recognized. Jordan lowered his hand, lightly gripping the handle of his briefcase, as though he had reached his final conclusion. "Very well," he said, neither fast nor slow. "If we continue doing this your way, in just a few more minutes, there will be nothing left to salvage." Karen opened her mouth to retort, but Jordan stepped forward half a pace and continued with a calm gravity that pulled the room tight. "Do you actually know who sits on this bank's board of directors?" This time, Karen didn't laugh. Her eyes flickered rapid, but Sophia caught it. A woman used to standing at the peak of her branch, used to giving orders, used to controlling everything within her sightline, yet someone who had never once bothered to look higher than her own position. "That is internal information," Karen said, her voice thin despite her effort to hide it. "It has nothing to do with you." Jordan raised an eyebrow. "It is public information. Anyone can check the filings with the Securities and Exchange Commission." A wave of whispers slipped through the crowd. An older customer murmured, "Filings with the SEC, that sounds like someone in the industry." Another lifted his glasses, muttering, "That doesn't sound like someone being kicked out of a bank." Karen looked around, feeling her balance falter. But instead of pausing, she charged straight into the cliff like a burning ship. "You think fancy terms scare me? I'm not the type to fall for fake professionalism. I have been a manager here for 15 years. I know who the real customers are and who is hiding something." "Yes," Jordan replied softly. "You are very confident in your ability to judge people." But his eyes sharpened like a blade. They met hers, a silent cut. "The question is, did you judge the right person today?" A flash of emotion darted across Karen's eyes. She turned away, too late to hide it. Phones moved closer. Sophia swallowed hard. She could see it. Karen was breathing like someone trapped in a corner. And then Jordan's phone rang again, echoing across the stone-floored lobby like metal striking rock. The screen lit up Board Chairman Langford Capital. This time Jordan did not silence it. He let everyone see. Karen's eyes widened. Harold's breath caught. Sophia nearly dropped her phone. Jordan placed his finger on the mute button, but didn't press it. He simply looked at Karen and spoke in a voice deep and commanding, the voice of a verdict dropping through the room. "Ms. Whitfield, this is not about me. This is about how you treat customers, and about the fact that you are about to learn exactly who you have been trying to throw out of this bank." A cold surge crawled up Karen's spine. For the first time, she did not respond immediately. For the first time, fear crept into her eyes. A door had opened in front of her, a door leading straight to consequences. she was never prepared to face. And Jordan saw it. He had seen that moment in hundreds of people in boardrooms, in negotiations, in deals worth billions. It was the moment truth closed in. A rising undertow was swirling beneath her feet. Slow, quiet, but powerful enough to erase a career in a single breath. And Karen was about to learn a name she should have memorized 15 years ago. A heavy silence fell the moment Jordan Cole reached for the lock on his leather briefcase. The soft click that followed was barely audible yet. In that charged atmosphere, it echoed like a warning siren cutting through a quiet night. People standing closest to him immediately leaned forward, trying to see what was being revealed. Phones zoomed in, tighter microphones strained to catch even the smallest sound. Some mouths hung open, some breaths stopped mid-chest. Others glanced at Karen to see how she would react. But Karen Whitfield no longer carried the swagger she had minutes earlier. Her eyes darted nervously the whites, showing more than usual, her lips dry and curled, as if silently asking herself, "What am I about to see?" Jordan didn't rush. He opened the briefcase with the careful, deliberate motion of a musician unveiling a priceless instrument before a performance. When the lid lifted, the overhead lights reflected off the glossy black leather, giving the entire moment a strange ceremonial weight. No one spoke. Even the usual background noises, keyboard taps, card swipes, footsteps on the stone floor disappeared. The bank grew so still that the tense breathing of those nearest Jordan became the only audible sound. Then he pulled out a document folder. Not the crumpled stack of papers a customer might bring when begging for an account approval. Not a flimsy, dog-eared file of someone pleading for a favor, but a thick silver-grey folder, stamped with the unmistakable logo of Langford Capital in the top left corner. For people who knew finance, that symbol was equivalent to seeing the seal of a giant. A few older customers lost their breath the instant they recognized it. A woman whispered, her voice trembling, "No, that can't be. That's from the largest investment fund in the Midwest." Jordan lifted the folder high enough for everyone to see. Then he spoke softly, but with a weight that tightened every throat in the room. "Ms. Whitfield, I think it's time you understood exactly who you've been trying to remove from this bank." Karen stepped back. Not far, but enough for her high heels to wobble for a split second. Her once straight posture dipped, her arms pulled closer to her body as though the temperature had suddenly dropped. Jordan opened to the first page. A bold line of text stared back at the crowd. Notification of controlling interest summit, First Trust Bank, Langford Capital Management. A wave of gasps rippled through the lobby. Sophia Ramirez covered her mouth eyes so wide she forgot to blink. Deshawn zoomed in so close he nearly stumbled into a marble column behind him. Jordan continued, not even glancing at the page anymore, as though he had memorized every line. Langford Capital currently holds 78% of Summit First Trust Bank's outstanding shares. Karen inhaled sharply, her face drained of color. And according to the corporate structure, Jordan went on, his voice firm as steel. Any changes involving branch operations must go through me. The truth detonated in the room, like a silent explosion, shattering the arrogance Karen had stacked around herself over 15 years as branch manager. Sophia screamed internally. Deshawn nearly burst into disbelieving laughter. Customers pressed closer together, murmurs swelling with shocked intensity. A middle-aged man placed a hand on his chest and whispered, "Dear God, she just threw out the man who owns this bank." Jordan pulled out another sheet, this one bearing the seal of the Federal Financial Regulatory Agency. "This is the report filed with the Securities and Exchange Commission." My fund manages $3.2 billion, of which $847 million is invested directly into the bank you are currently running. Harold Brooks froze. His eyes widened, as if a ghost had stepped out from the security office. He swallowed hard, panic blooming through his chest. Every instinct he had ever relied on went off like red alarms across a control panel. Jordan's earlier words, "You will know very soon," Mr. Brooks, slammed back into his mind. Jordan glanced at him. "Now you understand, don't you?" Harold nodded slowly, his heart heavy. Not because he feared Jordan, but because he realized how close he had come to making the worst mistake of his career, nearly using force on the man who owned the bank. Karen, meanwhile, could barely breathe. Her hands shook so violently she had to grab the edge of the counter behind her just to keep herself upright. She tried to speak, but her voice quivered like tearing paper. You're lying. This is some kind of trick." "It can't be. It can't." Jordan looked at her gently, placing the folder on the counter. The folder barely made a sound, hitting the stone, yet the weight of it crushed whatever remained of Karen's confidence. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Can't be. Or is it that you simply never bothered to read the shareholder reports? Karen opened her mouth, but her thoughts were frozen, jammed like a machine, locking up under pressure. Jordan reached into his jacket pocket and retrieved his wallet. He removed 3 items, placing them on the marble counter, one by one, like final chess pieces ending a match. A Georgia driver license, a metal American Express Centurion card, a corporate card bearing the name Jordan A. Cole, Senior Managing Partner, Langford Capital. The metallic thud of the Centurion card striking the marble echoed through the lobby. That single sound slammed the final blow into whatever credibility Karen had left. Phones zoomed in instantly. On Sophia's live stream, the comments exploded. "No way! Plot twist of the year, she's done." He's the CEO, the owner Jordan, looked at Karen one last time. His eyes were no longer cold. They were sad, the kind of sadness that only people who have been misjudged too many times in their life ever truly understand. "Ms. Whitfield," he said softly, every word heavy as stone. "The only thing I asked for was a simple account verification." One beat of silence passed. "And that is the task you refused to do." Karen collapsed into the chair behind her, as though her legs had lost all strength. And Jordan. He stood taller, documents in hand, and closed the reveal with a single sentence that made the entire bank hold its breath. "Now then, let's talk about consequences." A crushing silence fell over the lobby, just as Karen Whitfield was still reeling from the shock of seeing Jordan Cole's name and Langford Capital's documents laid bare. Then Jordan's phone rang again. Not the familiar tone of a regular call, but a piercing sound that sliced through the bank like a blade. Jordan glanced down at the screen, not hiding it, not shielding it. The name appeared clearly enough that even the people farthest away could see it. Edward Langford, Chairman. Sophia Ramirez almost dropped her phone. Deshaun Miller whispered a curse under his breath. An elderly woman near the ATM covered her mouth eyes, widening like she was witnessing a slow-motion explosion happening in real life. Karen stepped back once more. Her hands shook too violently to disguise it. There was no trace left of the proud branch manager. She had been minutes earlier only a stiff mask barely holding together under the weight of panic. Jordan looked at her for a brief moment, long enough for Karen to feel that his gaze was stripping away every layer she had used to hide behind. Then he answered the call. "Cole speaking. His voice echoed low and sharp, tightening the air in the lobby. He switched to speaker. A deep, precise British voice filled the space with immediate authority. "Jordan, I am in the New York boardroom. Update me on the situation at the Chicago branch." More than 100 witnesses froze. They weren't just hearing the voice of a chairman. They were hearing the voice of the highest authority in the entire bank. Karen felt her heartbeat drop into her stomach. Jordan straightened, placing the document folder before him, and responded with a tone cold enough to make the room feel smaller. "Mr. Langford, I am conducting the surprise audit we discussed last week, and I have just spent an hour being discriminated against, insulted, and ordered to be forcibly removed by the branch manager, Karen Whitfield." The lobby erupted in horrified whispers. Karen burst out, "No, no, he is." But Jordan lifted a single hand, and she fell silent instantly. The other end of the line went dead still, a silence heavy enough to crush someone's career. Then Edward's voice cut through sharp as glass snapping. "Jordan, repeat that. The branch manager discriminated against you, yes." Chairman Jordan answered, steady, emotionless. "She refused to let me speak, refused to check my documents, and attempted to have me removed from the premises. When I asked for account verification, she ordered security to use any means necessary." Harold Brooks shut his eyes. It felt like someone tightening a fist around his throat. He understood how close he had come to ending his 22-year career in one catastrophic moment. "Miss Whitfield." Edward's voice thundered through the speaker, shaking the room like a clap of thunder. "Are you present?" Karen tried to compose herself, but her voice came out thin as thread. "Oh yes, I am here, Chairman. I want a clear answer." Are the statements Mr. Cole just made true? The air thickened into concrete. Phones were nearly pressed against Karen's face. She glanced wildly around the room, searching for a way out. There was none. More than 100 witnesses, 2 live streams, the bank's surveillance system, and Jordan Cole, the man she tried to eject, was the controlling shareholder. "I think there may have been a misunderstanding." Edward cut her off instantly. "Answer directly." Karen swallowed hard. I did ask him to leave." Why, Karen had no answer. Her legs trembled uncontrollably. Sweat pooled at her temples. Jordan watched her the way one watches someone standing on the edge, waiting for the final push. Chairman Jordan said calmly, "I attempted to present identification documents and requested a simple verification." She declined all of it. Edward's voice turned icy enough to frost the glass surfaces in the room. "Miss Whitfield, are you aware of who Mr. Cole is?" Karen's breath hitched. I don't. He is the head of the fund that controls this bank. He is conducting your performance audit. And you failed it the moment he walked through the door." Someone in the lobby audibly exhaled in shock. Sophia covered her mouth with both hands. Deshawn shouted into his live stream, "Oh my God, she's finished!" Karen collapsed into a chair, eyes unfocused, lips trembling without sound. Edward continued voice-cutting like a blade. "You are suspended immediately. Security will escort you out. The internal investigation begins today." Harold Brooks glanced at Jordan, awaiting direction. He no longer doubted anything. Jordan outranked regional directors' executive leadership, perhaps everyone except the chairman himself. The hierarchy was crystal clear now, and Jordan stood at the very top of it. Karen tried to stand, but her legs buckled. "Please, Chairman, allow me to explain. I have heard enough." Edward's voice thundered through the high ceiling of the bank, like judgment from above. Jordan lowered the phone, ending the call with the finality of a gavel. No one spoke. No one dared breathe loudly. Jordan turned toward Karen and walked slowly each step, deliberate like a man reading the final lines of a report whose conclusion he had anticipated from the beginning. "Ms. Whitfield," he said softly, almost like an evaluation rather than an accusation, "I gave you a chance to correct your mistake. One chance. And you refused it." Karen tried to speak, but only incoherent sounds left her lips. Jordan turned to Harold. Mr. Brooks straightened, awaiting instructions. "Mr. Brooks," Jordan said, "escort her to human resources." Harold nodded and extended his hand. No force, no hostility, but also no mercy. Karen placed her trembling hand on his arm. She was led away like someone waking from a nightmare, unable to grasp anything, except that her entire world had collapsed beneath her feet. The HR door closed behind her. Jordan turned back to the lobby. Every phone in the room pointed at him. Hundreds of eyes fixed on the man who had flipped the entire situation by revealing nothing more than the truth. He adjusted his collar, took a slow breath, and spoke a single sentence that made the entire branch go silent. "We will now proceed with the performance evaluation of this branch." And in that moment, everyone understood one thing clearly: the real storm had not even begun. The air inside the bank did not lighten after Karen was escorted out. If anything, it grew heavier, thicker, as if everyone suddenly understood that what had just happened was only the opening tremor of a much larger earthquake. Jordan Cole stood at the center of the lobby, and every breath he took became the gravitational pull of the entire room. He looked around, unhurried and unaggressive, yet the space seemed to tilt naturally toward him. When a man with real power stands before a crowd, he does not need to perform authority. It radiates from his stillness. Jordan set the document folder on the marble counter, and with that single gesture, the room fell silent enough that the slow rotation of the ceiling vents could be heard. He powered on the tablet from his briefcase, its screen glowing bright. A chart appeared. Cold numbers. Lines plunging downward like arrows piercing targets. Not a flattering chart. Not the kind of data anyone would be proud of. Jordan turned the screen toward the crowd, his voice becoming the scalpel beginning to cut into the infection beneath the surface. The downtown Chicago branch of Summit First Trust Bank generates $12.3 million in annual revenue. A few customers nodded. They had read somewhere that this branch was one of the strongest in the system. Jordan continued and swiped to the next graph. But in the past 1 hour alone, 47 customers have walked out after witnessing discriminatory behavior from staff. Sophia tightened her grip on her phone. She remembered every disappointed face, every middle-aged customer who turned away, every person who muttered they would transfer funds elsewhere. Each departure was not just one customer, it was a long-term relationship lost. Jordan zoomed in on the numbers. Based on the average lifetime value of a customer, the estimated loss is $2.8 million. A ripple of murmurs swept through the crowd. A man in a suit whispered, "So one manager's behavior cost them nearly $3 million. Jordan heard him and turned slightly. Not because one manager behaved badly, he said, but because the system allowed it to happen without anyone intervening. All eyes shifted toward Harold Brooks and Emily Carter, both standing stiff near the service desk. Emily clasped her hands, her face pale. She understood the weight of those words. Jordan switched slides again. This time, national discrimination lawsuit statistics in the banking sector filled the screen. The average settlement per case is $2,400,000, not including legal fees, not including brand damage. The numbers fell like hammers. And when a public discrimination incident occurs, share prices drop an average of 8 to 12%. Sophia swallowed hard. Deshawn's camera shook slightly as his hands trembled. Jordan set the tablet down. He stepped forward half a pace, his voice lowering slower, as though addressing the very soul of the branch. What happened today is not simply the action of one person. It has never been just personal. This is the result of flawed training, weak protocol, and an internal culture that does not put customers first. He turned to Harold. "Mr. Brooks, let me ask you something. In your 22 years in security, how many hours of training have you received on recognizing and handling discriminatory situations?" Harold breathed in deeply. "We would get an annual training, mostly videos and a multiple-choice test. About 3 hours. Any real scenario training?" "No, sir." Jordan nodded. Not surprised, he turned to Sophia. "Ms. Ramirez, when you started working here, how many hours of customer service training did you receive?" 4 hours, sir," Sophia answered quietly. "About 15 minutes of that covered equality and customer respect. 15 minutes. Jordan repeated it like it was the clearest proof imaginable. He turned back to the entire lobby, to staff and customers alike. His voice sharpened. "This is not the fault of one person. This is the fault of an entire system, and systemic failures cannot be fixed with a single apology letter." He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick document, so heavy that when he set it on the counter, it landed with a deep, resonant thud. "This is the Customer Dignity Protocol, effective immediately at this branch." Deshawn zoomed his camera closer. Viewer numbers climbed rapidly. Jordan flipped to the first page. From this moment, every interaction between staff and customers will be recorded, stored and monitored using an AI system designed to detect biased language. A young employee behind the counter covered her mouth. "AI to track discrimination." Jordan looked at her. AI does not get emotional. It does not take sides. It reads data. He turned another page. Every employee will participate in monthly unconscious bias workshops. Not videos, not tests. Real scenarios, real simulations, real evaluations of behavior. Mandatory. He turned the page again. Customers will have the right to request a corporate-level representative if they feel mistreated. All feedback will be processed within 48 hours. Harold stared at Jordan the way a man watches someone dismantle an entire outdated system and replace it with one 10 times stronger. "We are not here to correct one mistake," Jordan said. "We are here to end a chain of mistakes that has gone unaddressed for years." Then he turned to Emily Carter. His eyes weren't as cold as when he looked at Karen. Not condemning, but heavier weight aimed directly at her conscience. "Miss Carter, tell me honestly. In the last hour, when you witnessed your manager behave wrongly, what did you do?" Emily's lips trembled. "I trusted her judgment. Trust or fear?" She lowered her head, cheeks burning, tears forming. Jordan's voice softened only slightly, but never lost its edge. "The silence of those who know better but say nothing is the fuel that keeps discrimination alive." A thick, suffocating silence spread over the room. Then Jordan faced the lobby again. His voice deepened, resonant like a declaration. "Today is not simply the fall of one manager. Today is the first step in a reform this branch should have undergone long ago." A customer near the counter whispered, "He didn't come here to cause trouble. He came here to fix it." Sophia looked up at Jordan, her eyes shining with respect, not because he was wealthy or powerful, but because he stood up exactly when someone needed to. Jordan scanned the room, his expression neither proud nor triumphant, only resolute. And we are only getting started. No one breathed loudly. No one turned away. Everyone understood this was no longer a personal conflict. This was a full-scale operation, right in the middle of the bank lobby. And Jordan Cole was the one holding the scalpel. The air in the bank lobby felt like it was holding a long breath it didn't dare release. Everything had happened too fast, too intensely, and too undeniably real. Not a scene from a movie, not a scripted drama, but truth exploding in real time. And when Jordan Cole turned back toward the HR room, where Karen Whitfield had disappeared moments earlier, the crowd could almost sense the second shockwave rolling in. Jordan walked toward the door. Not quickly, but each step carried the weight of a drum announcing a verdict. Sophia Ramirez kept filming. Deshaun Miller followed every movement. The live stream had passed 4,000 viewers and continued rising with every heartbeat. Faces in the lobby tightened eyes, locked on the man walking straight into the center of the storm, the man holding a level of authority no one in this building had ever imagined. The door opened. Karen sat slumped in a chair, fingers gripping the armrests like she was clinging to the last fragments of her power. Her eyes were red mascara smeared into streaks. A woman who once commanded dozens of employees, who wielded authority like a whip, now looked like she had been tossed through a tornado. Jordan stopped in front of her, close enough for her to feel the weight of his presence, but far enough that she couldn't reach for pity. Between them stood the truth, and it was far too large for Karen to hide from. "Miss Whitfield," Jordan's voice rang out not loud, but echoing through the cramped space like a strike of metal against metal. "Stand up." Karen rose slowly. Her legs trembled, but the look in Jordan's eyes kept her from sitting back down. The arrogance that once wrapped around her had disintegrated completely, leaving behind a woman overwhelmed, frightened. Jordan folded his arms, eyes fixed on her without blinking. "Do you understand your current situation?" Karen swallowed, trying to gather enough air to speak. I made a mistake. I know. But it was just an incident." I can explain. Jordan raised a hand, small but final. This was not an incident. This was behavior. A behavior repeated often enough to become habit. And habit becomes culture. A toxic culture. Karen fought back tears. "Please just give me a chance." Jordan cut her off, his voice slicing through the air like a blade. "You had a chance. From the very first minute. When I asked for account verification, you could have done your job. When I showed ID, you could have checked it. When I spoke politely, you could have returned the basic respect any human deserves. You refused every opportunity." Karen's shoulders collapsed. Jordan continued, his voice low, but so forceful that every syllable seemed to compress the air. "Now it is time for you to face consequences, but I will give you a choice, 3 choices, and you have exactly 12 minutes to decide." Karen's head snapped up. 12 minutes, Jordan checked his watch. "You now have 11 minutes and 40 seconds. The room seemed to freeze. Then Jordan laid out each word with precision. "Option 1, you resign. Here. Now. On camera. You publicly acknowledge your misconduct, admit to discriminatory behavior, and commit to a rehabilitation program that includes 6 months of mandatory training, community work, and participation in bias awareness workshops at this very branch. You will have a chance to rebuild your life." Karen trembled. It was still a path, a painful one, but a path. Jordan continued. "Option 2. You want to keep your position. Fine. But you will undergo a full 12-month correction program, direct supervision, quarterly evaluations, and you will answer to the internal council, to customers and to the public. One mistake, even the smallest, and your career ends instantly. Karen lowered her head. A brutal road, but still a road. Option 3, Jordan said, his voice dropping like thunder. You reject the first two. If so, this incident goes straight to the Illinois Anti-Discrimination Commission, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and the civil courts. You will also be placed on the permanent disqualification list for the banking industry. Forever. Karen's breath caught, her lungs emptied of air. She gripped her blouse with trembling fingers. I need time. Jordan looked at his watch. 11 minutes. Starting now. Karen collapsed back into the chair. Head-bowed hands gripping the table lips, trembling like she was begging someone who wasn't there. Jordan turned and walked out. When he stepped back into the lobby, a reverent silence washed across the room. No one spoke. No one moved. They looked at him, the way people look at a judge delivering the first half of a verdict. Not a verdict of punishment, but a verdict of truth. Jordan stood in the center of the lobby, facing Sophia and Deshawn, the two people who had raised their phones when so many others chose to look away. People like you, Jordan said, voice deep and sincere, are the reason truth doesn't die in silence. Today, you did what many others would not dare to do. Sophia's eyes filled. Deshawn tightened his grip on his phone. Jordan looked around the room. We did not just witness a mistake. We witnessed how an organization reacts when forced to confront its mistakes. And that is what separates a good bank from a great one. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried straight through every heart in the room. 12 minutes are not just for Karen Whitfield, Jordan continued. They are for all of us. To ask ourselves, when we see injustice, do we stay silent or do we stand up? Jordan turned slightly toward the HR hallway, his voice becoming the final note of a decision. When the 12 minutes are over, she will make her final choice. And that choice will not only change her life, but shape the future of this branch. The stage was set. The countdown had begun. And everyone knew one truth: the moment Karen returned would determine the fate of an entire era inside this bank. The bank lobby seemed to hold its breath as Karen Whitfield stepped out of the HR room. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen from tears, her shoulders trembling like someone who had been wrestling a storm inside her chest. The arrogance was gone. The cold command was gone. What remained was a woman standing at the greatest crossroads of her life. Jordan checked his watch. The 12 minutes are over. Karen swallowed hard, trying to steady herself under the weight of hundreds of eyes fixed on her. Her voice cracked as she finally spoke. I resign, effective immediately. A wave of whispers swept through the lobby. A few people covered their mouths. Deshawn zoomed in for a close-up, while Sophia's eyes shimmered with emotion. Karen drew a shaking breath and continued. I want to apologize to Mr. Cole, to all customers, and to the employees who had to work under my shortcomings. I acknowledge that my behavior was discriminatory, unprofessional, and inexcusable. She paused, tears rising again. I will take part in the rehabilitation program, the bias training, the community work. I will try to make amends for what I have done. Jordan nodded, not coldly, but without softness. His gaze carried the understanding that true remorse begins with choosing the harder path. Thank you for choosing the difficult but correct road, Jordan said. From this moment, you are no longer under investigation, but you will enter the recovery process. And that process will determine who you become in the future. Karen bowed her head. Not the bow of authority, but the bow of awakening. Harold Brooks stepped forward and quietly guided her out of the lobby. No applause, no ridicule, only the solemn silence of an old chapter closing. Jordan turned back to the crowd. Now he said softly, but carrying across the room, "We begin a new era for this branch." After Karen left the bank, Lobby went silent for a few seconds, as if the entire building needed a moment to reset its own breathing. Then Jordan Cole stepped forward, his eyes sweeping across the employees, standing tensely behind the teller counters, and the customers still staring at him as though they were witnessing the rebirth of an institution right before their eyes. Jordan opened his tablet, but this time it wasn't filled with heavy data. It displayed a list of reforms ready to be implemented. He spoke slowly, each word deliberate. "Beginning today, every branch of Summit First Trust Bank will adopt the Customer Dignity Protocol. The Chicago branch will lead the way." Harold Brooks stood straighter, and for the first time pride, not fear, shone in his eyes. Emily Carter nodded gently, a silent promise that she would never again stay quiet in the face of wrongdoing. Sophia Ramirez clutched her phone, tears slipping down her cheeks, as she realized she had helped spark something far larger than herself. Jordan looked at each of them, his voice deep but warm. "I did not come here to tear anything down. I came to rebuild. For all of you. For our customers. And for the future of this bank." Someone in the crowd exhaled softly, a relieved breath carried through the room. An older customer murmured, "It's about time." Jordan closed the tablet. "Let today be the beginning. Not of shame, but of change." He walked toward the exit. Light from LaSalle Avenue flooded into the lobby bright and sharp, as if opening the door to an entirely new chapter. And everyone understood from this moment on, Summit First Trust Bank would never again be the same. It would become a place where customers were treated with dignity and where mistakes would no longer be allowed to hide. From the perspective of an expert in leadership and organizational culture, Jordan Cole's story proves an undeniable truth. Real power does not come from title or intimidation, but from the ability to rebuild a system when it drifts away from human values. An organization is only strong when it has the courage to face its mistakes without hiding, without excusing, and with the will to change from within. What happened at the Chicago branch today is not the end of an incident, but the beginning of a new standard for dignity, fairness, and accountability. If you believe every customer deserves respect, then like and subscribe to follow more stories that transform systems at their very foundation. And before you go, leave a short comment. Respect everyone.